Hello everyone, welcome to the first video of our series Virtualization and Hyper-v. In this first video, we are going to talk about the overview of virtualization and Hyper-v. My name is Naval, I am an IT professional and I have 6 years of experience in virtualization, Hyper-v, VMware, Linux and Windows servers, Azure and AWS cloud technologies. So we are going to have the sessions related to all these technologies. First, we are going to start with virtualization because this is the base of the cloud. So let's get started. So first we need to understand the need of virtualization, why exactly we needed it. To be able to understand that, we are going to look at some pictures. In the first image, you will see that all the family members are watching the same television, the same program on it. In the second one, you will see that there is a new television at home and some of the family members have started watching the new one because they have their own favorite program which they were not able to watch on the other one. So they have got the new TV, they will watch it. In the third image, you will see that even if there are two televisions at home, there are still some family members like this guy who is not happy because he is not able to watch his favorite program. There may be a different favorite program for each and everyone, right? So to be able to resolve this problem for this situation, the solution was to get a new TV at home for each member, right? But that wasn't really an ideal solution. And we can relate the same situation to the business, to the production scenarios. That suppose all these family members are the applications which are running on one physical server. Now, if one application requires more resources, what will happen? Either the host may crash or the application will run slow because it's not getting the resources that it requires. So even if to be able to resolve that, we get a different physical server, but that is still not an ideal solution because we cannot really get a new physical server for each and every application. And if one application requires more resources, it wasn't possible in case of physical servers to increase RAM or hard drive within a few minutes or days because it used to take some time while you will order the parts and then you will assemble it, then it will be ready. And most importantly, you will have to have some downtime for your business, which I don't think any business would want. So to be able to resolve this problem, when each and every application would require a separate physical server to be able to run, virtualization was introduced. Now what happens in virtualization is you will have one physical box, the hardware with the operating system in it, and you will install a hypervisor on top of that. Once you have the hypervisor installed on your physical box, it will enable you to create as many virtual machines as you want on that one physical box. So this resolves your problem of getting a separate physical server for each and every application or the servers that you want. So you can create multiple virtual machines on single host, and these virtual machines can run Windows, Linux, or any operating system that you would like. So if we talk about the definition of virtualization, it is actually the creation of a virtual rather than actual version of something, such as an operating system, server, storage, device, or network resources. Good. Next, we're going to talk about virtualization types. Virtualization is divided in four parts: hardware, server, network, and storage virtualization. So if we talk about hardware virtualization, this is just like when we have a physical hard drive or physical RAM, we can create virtual hard drive as well as virtual RAM within a virtual machine, and we can increase it whenever we want. If we talk about server virtualization, that's the same thing which we just talked about, that we used to have physical servers to be able to run our resources. Now we can create virtual machines, and in those virtual machines we can install any server that we want. So that will be called your server virtualization. In case of network virtualization, we can create virtual networks as well as virtual network interface cards for our virtual machines. As we all know that in physical servers, we have physical network interface cards. But to be able to get more physical interface cards, we will need to pay for that, right? But that's not the case in case of virtualization. we can create as many virtual NICs for our virtual machines as we want, depending on our need. Next is storage virtualization. As we all know that in case of physical servers, we have the hard drives, SSDs, HDDs. So if we have any bottleneck or any storage capacity issue with our physical server, we may not be able to increase it whenever we want. But once we virtualize the storage and we provide it to our virtual machines, we can increase the hard drive size of our virtual machines whenever it requires. So that's one of the benefits of virtualization, that we can virtualize all these parts. We can virtualize hardware, server, network, and storage. Alright, now we are going to talk about the hypervisors. So in the previous slide, we talked about that once we install hypervisor, it will enable us to create multiple virtual machines on one physical box. Now, what exactly this hypervisor is? So hypervisor is the tool or the software that made virtualization possible. Now, this hypervisor is being created by multiple vendors. You will have hypervisor from Microsoft, which is called Hyper-v. VMware, with the hypervisor for VMware is ESXi, and Citrix, as we all know. So Hypervisor is a tool that helps us in making virtualization happen. There are several vendors who build hypervisors: Microsoft's Hyper-v, VMware ESXi, Citrix and Server, Oracle VM VirtualBox, and VMware Workstation. Now there are two types of hypervisors, Type 1 and Type 2 hypervisor. Type 1 hypervisors run directly on the bare metal hardware. They do not interact with the operating system while working on any operation for the virtual machines. In the right side in the image, you will see that Type 1 hypervisor will have one hardware. On top of that, it will have a hypervisor, and then on top of that, we can create the virtual machines. There is no operating system in between hypervisor and hardware. So we need to understand that in case of Type 1 hypervisors, we do not have any operating system in between hypervisor and hardware. Hypervisor is directly talking to the hardware for any operation. In case of Type 2 hypervisors, we can see there is a hardware, and then we have got the host operating system installed on that hardware. And then on top of that operating system, we have the hypervisor installed. And then we can create virtual machines. Now, because we have an operating system in between hypervisor and hardware, so hypervisor has to go through that operating system for all operations related to the virtual machines, and that will utilize the resources of hardware also. So that's why Type 1 hypervisor is better than Type 2 hypervisor, and it is used in production in large organization environments so that they can create their own virtualized environments. While Type 2 hypervisor is generally used for lab and practices, for training sessions, so that we can create the small environments, some testing environments. And Type 1 hypervisor is categorized under hardware virtualization. Type 2 is for operating system virtualization. And as we have already talked about, Type 1 is comparatively better than Type 2. In Type 1 hypervisor, the performance is very high. Resources are not being consumed by the bloated parent operating system, as we talked about, because there is no operating system in between. So that's why Type 1 hypervisor will directly communicate with the hardware. And in Type 2, there will be steep resource overhead penalties, reduced performance. And that's obvious, because if there is an operating system in between, it will definitely consume some resources. So this clears our difference between Type 1 and Type 2 hypervisors. Next, we are going to talk about a very important point regarding Hyper-v. In our next videos, we will be learning how we install Hyper-v on Windows servers as well as on Windows 10 devices. And as we have just talked about, that the hypervisor which are installed on an operating system are Type 2 hypervisors. So when we will install Hyper-v on Windows Server or Windows 10, you will think that it is being installed on an operating system. So it may be called, or it should be called, a Type 2 hypervisor, but no. Why? Because once we install Hyper-v on the operating system, the setup converts the operating system in something like a VM, and it puts the hypervisor below it. So let's see these two images to understand it better. In the first image, you will see the standard OS model, where we have got the hardware, operating system, and applications. You will see that the applications always run on top of operating system. In the second image, we can see that once the Hyper-v hypervisor is installed, it has come below the operating system. So this parent partition that you see in here, this is called the operating system. And these child partitions are called the virtual machines that we have created. So as soon as we install Hyper-v on a Windows Server or Windows 10 operating system, Hypervisor comes below the operating system automatically. So in this image, you will see that we have got the hardware and then we have the hypervisor. We don't have the operating system on top of hardware. Where is the operating system? It is right here in terms of parent partition. So we need to understand when we install Hyper-v on a Windows server or on a Windows 10 machine, that server or that operating system will be called a parent partition. And all the virtual machines that we will be installing on it, all those would be called your child partitions. And your hypervisor will be in direct contact with your hardware, so that there will be no resource utilization by your operating system in between hypervisor and hardware. Next, we are going to see different virtual and physical components, that what these are called. So the physical machine components would be RAM, hard disk, processor, network interface cards, parent OS, physical switch, physical hard drive connectors like SATA and PATA. In terms of virtual machines, these components are still there because to be able to make an operating system, you need these components, right? But in case of virtual machines, all these would be virtual. So the RAM would be called your dynamic or fixed RAM. Hard disk will be called virtual hard disk. You will have virtual CPUs in a virtual machine, virtual NICs, which we talked about. These are virtual network interface cards. And you will have guest operating systems, the child partitions that we talked about, and the host operating system would be called the parent OS. We can create virtual switches when we use virtualization, and we have the virtual connectors to be able to connect our virtual hard drives. We have got IDE and SCSI. In this image, you can see that there are these data centers which are generally used to create this cloud. So there will be some storage racks, there will be some network racks, there will be some server racks which will create that data center. And with the help of all these components, you will create a cloud. It depends on you if you want to create a private cloud or a public cloud and offer the services to the external world as well. Alright, that is it for today. I hope you were able to understand the overview of virtualization and Hyper-v. In our next video, we are going to learn about how we can install Hyper-v on Windows servers and Windows 10 machines. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have got any queries, please feel free to comment in the comment section. Let's meet in the next video.